1912, a disaster resulted in the loss of 1,517 people's lives. This is our history and something that changed boat travel for all of us. It's the disaster of the Titanic. In researching this subject, I have learned many uncommonly known facts about the Titanic, and some things that you'll learn in my speech are why the largest, most advanced ship in the century sunk, some things they could have done differently, and the impact it's had on our culture and boat regulations for passenger ships. Many of you might think that the Titanic sunk because of hitting an iceberg, but there are other hidden facts and fatal flaws that went into the sinking of this great, unsinkable ship. Some press of the day thought that it was Captain Smith's fault. According to HistoryOnTheNet.com, this was Captain Smith's retirement trip, and all he had to do was get to New York in record time to end his career making headlines. Captain Smith had said years before Titanic's voyage, "I cannot imagine any situation which would cause a ship to founder. Modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that." Captain Smith ignored 7 iceberg warnings from his crew and other ships. If Captain Smith had called for the ship to slow down, maybe the disaster would not have happened. Furthermore, some historians believe it was Thomas Andrew, the shipbuilder's fault, and that the ship was doomed from the start. About 3 million rivets went into holding the sections of the Titanic together. Some of those rivets were recovered from the wreck and analyzed. Findings showed that the rivets were used of substandard iron. And when the ship hit the iceberg, the force of the impact caused the heads of the rivets to break and the sections of the Titanic to come apart. If good quality iron rivets had been used, then maybe the sections of the Titanic would have stayed together and the ship would not have sunk. As you can see from my visual, another factor that went into the sinking of the Titanic were the watertight bulkheads. There were watertight doors, but when 5 of the first bulkheads flooded, this caused the rest of the ship to flood, and bringing the front of the ship below the waterline and the back of the ship to tilt upwards, making it difficult to launch the lifeboats. The other ships of the day had already modified their designs, making the bulkhead doors higher and watertight at the top to prevent such water spilling over. One of the factors that makes the sinking of the Titanic so memorable is the fact that lives were so needlessly lost due to a lack of safety precautions and procedures. Charles Lightoller, as a surviving senior officer, was questioned about the fact that the lifeboats were not built to capacity. Before the journey, Charles Lightoller had said that the lifeboats had carried 70 men safely in a practice drill. Lifeboat number 6 was designed to hold 65 people, but left the Titanic with just 40 survivors. There were 16 lifeboats upon Titanic with over 3,000 people on board. This left 472 spots unused. The sad truth about the Titanic is that
the sad truth was an hour
after the Titanic hit an iceberg. A disorderly evacuation process began at the launching of the first lifeboat, which had only 28 people on board. This is believed because there were people who did not consider themselves in immediate danger. After all, this was the unsinkable ship. Although the law of the sea required that women and children board first, the main survivors of the Titanic were upper class, as they were granted first access and launched the boats very underfilled. You may not know that there are 3,500 life belts and 48 life rings on the Titanic. useless in the icy water. Did you know that the majority of the passengers that went into the water did not sink but froze to death? Many lifeboats stayed away from the people who fell into the water, afraid that they would be overwhelmed and sink. After Titanic sunk, many new rules went into effect. Such rules stipulated that there be lifeboats for everyone, and one spot for each person on board. And also, that a lifeboat drill be conducted shortly after leaving port. Furthermore, shipping routes were changed to avoid ice floes. And a radio act went into effect that made it mandatory that a radio operator be on duty 24/7, as there was a ship just 20 miles from the Titanic, but never received the distress call because there was no operator on duty. Now you know the whole truth about the Titanic. You know that it was not just from hitting an iceberg, but rather the shipbuilder's fault for using faulty building materials, and the captain and crew's overconfidence in new technology and their failure to perform a evacuation that was proper. Now you know the whole story. You can relax and enjoy your next trip, knowing that new safety precautions have been inspired from the sinking of the Titanic, and you'll be safe on your next sea voyage. Bon voyage.